One day, your child is going to make an important decision and you will not be there in the room. You won't be there to say, don't do that. You won't be there to check their phone. You won't be there to choose their friends. You won't be there to remind them what you had taught them. And perhaps you won't even know that a decision has to be made. So, what will guide them when you're not there? Your rules, fear of your reaction, or something that they have created within themselves, judgments, values, self respect, the ability to think before they act. For me, this is one of the biggest questions of parenting. Because when our children are young, we can protect them by controlling much of their environment. We decide where they go, who takes them, do they watch, when do they sleep, what are they allowed to do. But adolescence changes that equation. Their world becomes bigger, and our ability to supervise every part of it becomes smaller, which means parenting has to accomplish something extraordinary. We have to gradually move to guidance which came from outside them to inside them. That is what I want to talk about today. Not how do I make my teenager obey me, but how do I raise a young person who can make wise decisions when I am not watching? Because adolescence isn't simply a period which we have to survive. It is a preparation ground for adulthood. And there are 5 important shifts happening during these years, which every parent needs to understand. Not so that we become permissive, not so that because teenagers can do whatever they want, but so that we know when to hold, when to guide, when to question, and when to gradually let go. Let's begin with something that explains many of those moments for parents when they ask, "You knew that was a very bad idea. Why did you still do it?" Because the first shift is happening in a place which you cannot see. Your teenager's brain is still under construction. Have you ever had this experience? You explain something to your teenager. They understand you perfectly. They may even say, "Yes, Amma, I do understand." And then a few hours later, they do exactly the thing you discussed. And you wonder, if you knew better, why didn't you do better? This is where understanding adolescence becomes important, because knowing something and consistently applying that knowledge in the moment are not always the same thing. During adolescence, the systems involved in emotion, reward, social response, and impulse can be extremely powerful, while the abilities involved in planning ahead, weighing consequences, and regulating responses are still developing. So your teenager may genuinely know this isn't a good idea, and still, in the excitement of the moment, with friends watching, with emotions running high, make a poor choice. This doesn't mean we excuse a choice. Understanding is not the same as forgetting. They still need boundaries. They still need consequences. They still need accountability. But understanding developmental changes how we respond from what when something goes wrong. We often ask, "What were you thinking?" Usually, we aren't actually asking. We are saying, "You clearly weren't thinking." But imagine changing that conversation. Instead of only saying, "That was a terrible decision," ask, "Take me through what happened. What were you thinking at that moment? What options did you have? What did you not consider? If the same situation happens again, what could you do differently?" Notice what has changed. We haven't removed accountability. We have added reflection. And that matters. Because if our goal is to rate an adult who can eventually make decisions without us, then every manageable mistake can be converted into a practice for judgment. Sometimes parenting isn't about giving the right answer. Sometimes it's about asking the right question, which helps the child find the right answer. So the next time your teenager makes a poor but manageable decision, before immediately solving the problem for them, try asking, "What do you think you should do now?" You may be surprised. Sometimes they already know. And every time they think through a consequence, consider an alternative, repair a mistake, or find a solution, something important is happening. They aren't merely following your judgment, they are beginning to build their own. And that takes us to the second shift. Because adolescence isn't only changing the way your child thinks, it is changing the way your child ends with an enormous question: who am I? As children move towards adolescence, another question begins becoming increasingly important. Not what do Amma and Appa want me to do, but who am I? And parents, this is a question we need to respect because for many years we've been helping them construct our child's identity. We say, she is responsible, he is very shy, she is brilliant in studies, he doesn't mix with people, she is stubborn, he is lazy. Sometimes we say these things casually, sometimes affectionately, sometimes in frustration, and sometimes we say them in front of other people. But adolescence is a period when your child begins to explain all these descriptions and ask, is that really who I am? And this process can look like resistance. Your child develops a different taste in clothes, different music, different interests, different opinions. They may question something the family has always done. And sometimes parents become frightened. Who is influencing you? You went like this before. But before we assume that every difference is a rebellion, I want us to consider another possibility. Your child may be simply practicing becoming a separate person. Parents, this is where our language matters. Suppose your teenager makes an irresponsible decision. You can say, that decision was irresponsible, or you are irresponsible. Those few sentences are not the same. One describes a behavior that can change, the other describes the child. A child lies. What you told me wasn't a truth is different from you are a liar. The child struggles academically. You're finding the subject difficult right now is very different from you are just not good at studies. Young people hear our descriptions repeatedly, and eventually some of those descriptions can become the voice they use inside their own heads. So, one mentoring principle I would give every parent is correct the behavior without shrinking the person. Your child needs correction. Your child needs feedback. Your child needs accountability. But they also need room to become more than their worst decision. So this week, listen to the language you use around your teenager. Notice how often you say you are lazy, careless, stubborn, difficult, sensitive, irresponsible. Instead, describe what happened. Separate the person from the pattern. Because adolescents already asking your child, who am I? Be careful that your frustration doesn't answer the question to them. Just as your child's understanding of themselves is changing, their understanding of where they belong is also changing. That takes us to shift 3. Parents sometimes tell me, "Ma'am, if I say something, she argues." When her friend says exactly the same thing, and suddenly it makes sense. If you have experienced this, you're certainly not alone. During adolescence, the social world becomes extraordinarily important. Friends are no longer simply people who your child plays with. They become part of the world in which your teenager is discovering herself. Where do I belong? Who accepts me? What makes me different? What makes me acceptable? What will make people reject me? And that is why something that looks very small to an adult may look enormous to a teenager. Not being invited, being left out of a group, a friend suddenly not replying, someone making fun of their appearance, a photograph getting ignored, a comment in a group chat. We may look at it with 40 or 50 years of life experience and think this is such a small thing. But your teenager doesn't yet have those many years of perspective. For them, this may be the biggest social rejection they've experienced so far. That doesn't mean we magnify every problem. It means we don't minimize the feelings simply because this problem will pass. For today's teenagers, the school gate no longer closes its social world. The peer group can come home in their pocket. Comparisons can continue at night. Belonging can be measured in likes, replies, groups, photographs, and invitations. And therefore, simply telling them, don't care what other people think, isn't really enough. Instead, we need to help them build something stronger: discernment. Who influences me? Why do I want their approval? What happens to me when I'm around this group? Am I doing something because I believe it or because I'm afraid of being excluded? Those are skills and they have to be developed. Here's where I want parents to be particularly careful. Suppose you don't like one of your child's friends. Your first instinct may be, I don't want you to be talking to that boy, or that girl is a bad influence. Sometimes intervention may absolutely be necessary, especially where safety is involved. But in many ordinary situations, attacking a friend can make your teenager defend the friendship even more strongly. Instead, become curious. Here's where I want parents to be particularly careful. Suppose you don't like one of your child's friends. Your first instinct may be, I don't want you to be talking to that boy, or that girl is a bad influence. Sometimes intervention may absolutely be necessary, especially when safety is involved. But in many ordinary situations, attacking the friend can make your teenager defend the friendship even more strongly. Instead, try becoming curious. Ask, I've noticed you become different after spending time with this group. Have you noticed it too? Or, what do you like the most about being with them? Or, do you ever feel you have to behave differently to fit into that group? Here, you're not merely controlling the friendship, but you're teaching your child evaluate influence. And remember our opening question. What will guide them when you're not there in the room? You cannot choose every friend which your child will ever have, but you can build a young person how to choose. Now, this moves us to shift 4. Their need for autonomy is changing. One of the most common battles during adolescence revolves something around like this. Why should I ask you? Because I'm a mother, but everyone else is allowed. I don't care what everyone else's parents do. Familiar? Underneath many of these arguments is an important developmental tension. Your teenager is saying, let me begin managing my life. And the parent is thinking, but I know how much can go wrong. Both perspectives can contain truth, but the teenager needs increasing independence, but he is not ready for unlimited independence. So the answer isn't total control or total freedom, but it is graduated freedom. The three circles of freedom. I want to give you a simple framework. Think about your teenager's life in 3 circles. Green circle, you decide. These are age-appropriate choices where the consequences are manageable. Perhaps what clothes to wear within reasonable family expectations. How to arrange their room. which hobby to pursue, how to spend some of their free time. Give them space to decide. They need practice making choices. Amber Circle, we decide together. These are areas where independence is growing, but guidance is still necessary. Screen use, outings, spending, study routines, social plans. Don't simply announce every decision. Discuss. Negotiate where appropriate. Explain the boundary. Listen to their reasoning. And then decide together where possible. Red circle, the adult holds a boundary. Safety, dangerous behavior, legal issues, serious safeguarding concerns, situations where the potential consequences is too significant to make experimentation appropriate. Here, parental authority still matters. And I want to say this very clearly because respectful parenting is sometimes misunderstood as permissive parenting. It isn't. Children need boundaries. But a boundary does not have to humiliate a child in order to be strong. Our green, amber, and red circles of influence framework makes this distinction clear. Adolescence requires more age-appropriate choices while still maintaining clear family boundaries and responsibilities. Your teenager needs a different kind of parental authority. As children grow, there is a temptation to think we have only two choices. Either I am the parent, you do what I say, or the teenagers now, and I have to let them make their own choices. I don't believe these extremes prepare the young person well because adolescence does not make parental authority unnecessary. It changes what effective authority looks like. When children are very young, authority can often work through instruction. Don't touch. Come here. Hold my hand. It's bedtime. We don't negotiate safety rules with a 5-year-old. But when children grow, something important has to be added to the authority reasoning because eventually we want our children to know what the rule is, but they should know what this rule is trying to protect. Don't just give the rule, teach the principle. Suppose your teenager asks, "Why can't I stay out later?" The quickest answer is, "Because I said so." And sometimes, after all the discussion is over, you may still have to say, "This is the boundary. You are the parent." But before that, there is an opportunity. You can say, "Let's talk about what concerns me. Safety. Who will be there? How are you traveling? What time are you returning? Whether I can reach you. What will you do if the plan changes?" Now something different is happening. Your teenager is seeing how you can evaluate through this. That's very important because one day you won't be there to set the curfew. They have to evaluate the situation themselves. Let them see your thinking. Young parents, this is something I would strongly encourage you to practice. Don't give your teenager only your decisions. Wherever appropriate, let them hear your decision-making process. Instead of "no," sometimes explain, "These are the 3 things I'm considering before I answer you." Instead of "You're too young," try "Show me that you are ready for this responsibility." Instead of "Absolutely not," sometimes ask, "If I say yes, what could go wrong? How would you handle it?" Do you see the difference? You're not surrendering authority. You are making your judgment visible. And that is one of the ways children learn judgment. Not every why is disrespect. This is another distinction parents of teenagers need. When a small child asks why, we often think they are curious. When a teenager asks why, we sometimes hear, "How dare you question me?" Of course, teenagers can speak disrespectfully. Tone matters. Respect matters. Family boundaries matter. But the act of questioning itself is not necessarily disrespect. Sometimes a teenager is trying to understand, does this rule make sense? Is it fair? Does my opinion matter? Can I disagree with my parent and still belong in this relationship? Those are important questions on the road to adulthood. So we can teach, you are allowed to disagree with me, but you're not allowed to disrespect me. That's a very different situation. If you disagree with me, your disrespecting me is completely wrong. One teaches respectful disagreement. The other one teaches compliances without agreement. And here's something I learned over years of working with young people. Adults sometimes become so focused on winning the immediate argument that we forget the larger lesson we are trying to teach. Suppose your teenager disagrees with you. You can naturally win that because you have more power. You control the permission, the money, the phone, the outing. And sometimes you absolutely must hold the boundary. But after the argument, ask yourself, what did my child learn from that conversation? Did they learn, when I disagree, I must become louder? Did they learn, there's no point in explaining myself? Or did they learn, I may not always get what I want, but I can state my case, listen to another perspective, and handle a no without the relationship becoming a battlefield? That's a life skill. They will need it with their professors, employers, partners, colleagues, friends, and eventually even with their own children. So perhaps the fifth shift is not simply, I need to control less. We've already spoken about that. It is something more purposeful. I need to make parenting more developmental. Every boundary can teach something. Every disagreement can teach something. Every decision can teach something. Every manageable mistake can teach something. The question becomes, what capacity am I trying to build in my child through this situation? Judgment, responsibility, self-control, problem solving, respectful disagreement, risk assessment, recovery after a mistake. Because then parenting stops becoming only about how do I get through today's problem and begins asking, what does my child need to learn for his life? So let's return to where we began. One day your child will make an important decision and you will not be in the room, but perhaps something of you will be. The questions you taught him to ask, the values you helped them examine, the judgment you allowed them to practice, the mistakes you allowed them to learn from, the boundaries that taught them responsibility, and the security of knowing whatever happens, I still have somewhere to come back to. That is why I don't see adolescence as a difficult parenting phase. I see it as an apprenticeship for parenthood. And parents, we are the mentors. Our job is not to make every decision for them. Our job is to help them become increasingly capable of making decisions without us. Not to remove every obstacle, but to help them develop the strength to remove one. Not to prevent every mistake, but to ensure that manageable mistakes become their teachers rather than identities. Dear parents of preteens and teenagers, I'm inviting you to join me live on 29th August at 7 p.m. for a free 60-minute parent masterclass. If you're navigating communication, boundaries, independence, peer influence, or simply wondering how your parenting needs to evolve as your child grows, this conversation is for you. Registration is free. I'll see you there.